Hello, everybody. Welcome back. In today's episode, I wanted to talk a little bit with you about two things. I guess it's four things altogether. So, just a quick introduction again. My name is Dave King. I'm a general dentist. I've been practicing for this is my 20th year if you don't count the 4 years of dental school. I live in the St. Louis area. I'm a full-time general dentist and a full-time flower farmer, husband, and father. So, husband, father, flower farmer, dentist, or maybe dentist, flower farmer, depending on the order and depending on the day. Anyway, so I've started this podcast, this show, if you will, to share some thoughts and reactions and commentary about what I think is going on in the world. And I hope it's useful and helpful to you. I think I've got kind of a unique perspective from the standpoint of what's happening and what's going on, given my experience and some of the unique opportunities I've had in varying situations and with varying people across different cultures. So hopefully what I share is helpful. If you enjoy it, like, subscribe, and share. So I want to start this episode off by talking about the book that I read or listened to rather, and then watched the movie, The Life of Pi. I know this book got a lot of kind of critically acclaimed reviews. Very interesting storyline for those of you that know it. It's really, really interesting, and I'm not going to dig into the details and the minutia necessarily, but just to kind of give you a broad overview of my personal experience with this book. So let me set the stage for you about when I was listening to it or reading it, if you will, via audiobook. So, as I mentioned, I have a flower farm and we are in Missouri. And so there's lots of grass that grows, and among the grass is lots of weeds. And so periodically, weekly or thereabouts, I get to spend some time on a tractor. And many times it's several hours at a time on a tractor. And in the past, I've listened to all sorts of things. I'm an active practicing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I spend time listening to the scriptures, listening to conference talks, listening to podcasts that are interesting to me, and sometimes just being quiet and being still, if you will, on a tractor or lawnmower. But I've recently started listening to more audiobooks, trying to get my perspective, my horizons opened a little bit. And this was one of the first that I began with more recently. So I turned the audiobook on and I set my noise cancellation on the AirPods, and I drive around in circles for hours at a time listening to the book. So that's when I'm doing it, driving around mowing the grass with our little Kubota 5-foot mower belly tractor going. Lots of diesel fuel. So this book is really interesting. It tells the story of Pi, his growing up, his younger childhood, his early adolescence, and then the adventure really begins when his family begins to relocate to Canada, and has a shipwreck. Well, the ship sinks, and he is left with several animals on a lifeboat. And so the story is essentially him braving and surviving um, this terrible, horrifying, harrowing ordeal of living on a lifeboat for 274 days, I think it is, something, with a full-grown Bengal tiger, male Bengal tiger, not a tire, and how he survives. And some of the choices he has to make, some of the decisions that he makes aren't good, some are excellent. You know, a very interesting storyline to follow. It was really engaging for the most part. That story tends to share a little bit more of the gruesome details of, what might be required if you're consuming an animal or a fish or a turtle or what have you. And some of that was a little bit more than what I needed to hear, recognizing it as part of the story and contributed to the plot line to some degree. It's worth pushing through those sections and not giving up. Um, so it tells the story of him going through all these adventures, right? And then eventually he ends up in Mexico and is interviewed by, his boat lands in Mexico, his lifeboat lands in Mexico, and he's rescued and ends up in a hospital and is interviewed by the company that owns the ship that sank. And it's interesting the story that he tells and their feedback, the questions that they respond with. Um, and then he is asked to share the true story, because what the story that he shared, which is the bulk of the book, 98% of the book, is unbelievable to them. And so he shares a different story, which I won't give you here. He shares a different story, and then they write their report. And in the report, they refer to the first story, again, the one with the Bengal tiger in the lifeboat, as the better story, which is kind of, in my opinion, the point of the book. The point of the book is about choosing your own adventure, if you will. We're put in all these difficult, different situations, and we have an opportunity how we're going to interpret or choose what we're experiencing. We can either look at it in a very negative way, or consider rewriting the story, or at least interpreting the story in a different way so that it's positive, it's uplifting, it's elevating, and it provides us with something that is regenerating and supportive. So he refers to God many, many times. He becomes a Hindu, or he is a Hindu. He becomes a Muslim, becomes a Christian, and it's interesting how Pi in the story is constantly referencing his connection to God. And during the storms that are on the, when he's on the boat in the sea, it's very interesting and compelling how he gives his life repeatedly over to God in hopes that he'll be rescued. So the book is fantastic. The book is amazing. After I listened to the audiobook, I watched the movie, the um, blockbuster movie, I guess. It was on Prime Video, so I watched it, and it was very, very good. If I had to choose one or the other, I probably would choose the movie, because the storyline was, some of the details I mentioned earlier on weren't there. The gruesome details were left out, which I appreciated. Didn't need to hear all of that necessarily, but the imagery and some of the interpretation of the story was really, really well done. And I like how it's discussed, and some of the imagery and the jumping back and forth in time to current from the past. And the actors were amazing. The actresses, everybody in that movie was amazing. So I highly recommend it. Definitely a good movie if you want to have an adventure, a journey to go through with Pi and his redemption, if you will. So fantastic story. Highly recommend. I could have used without, like I said, some of the details in the book, uh, but it was definitely worth the time, and it was certainly a diversion that I enjoyed as I was mowing the lawn, listening to the audiobook. Okay, so part number two, chapter two of the video, I guess. I want to talk a little bit about conversations in a dental office. So we all hear these things from various people, like we shouldn't be talking about religion or politics or sex when we're working with a patient. As a dentist, I was told that when I was in dental school. You never bring up politics with a patient, you never bring up religion, and certainly you never talk about sex with a patient or over a patient while you're working on them. None of that should be brought into the operatory. So my next question is, what do we talk about? We chit chat, we small talk, we provide some input, some feedback about what we're doing and why we're doing it, the process. But ultimately, that becomes very mundane and very repetitive, especially for those of us that have done it for 20 years or more. So what do you talk about? So I would gently resist that commentary about not talking about at least politics and religion. Um, because I think if we approach it the right way, we can have a meaningful conversation even with people who disagree with us. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. I guess the point of this video, this episode, is even though something bad or something we disagree with is in front of us or happening to us, or someone is saying something that we don't espouse or don't agree with, that doesn't mean we have to look at it in a negative light or in a negative way. We don't have to vehemently disagree. We don't have to be aggressive. We don't have to allow our emotions to overrule us, which I think a lot of times, especially when we're talking about religion or politics, these things tend to cause us to bristle, um, kind of like a tiger stuck in the corner, a dog with its hair up, or a cat painted into a corner. We tend to overreact when someone disagrees with us. And I think that is one of the main issues that we're experiencing from a cultural standpoint, is that we have a very difficult time communicating with people who may have disparate or different or opposing views than what we have. Um, and so I think ultimately it comes down to a desire to communicate openly and to communicate in a way that allows us to maintain respect for each other. You've probably heard the saying, you can disagree without being disagreeable. So I would encourage us all to consider what we can do to disagree if we need to without being disagreeable. You hear the phrase, well, let's agree to disagree. And I don't agree with that phrase. Um, I think it goes without saying that we're going to disagree, and that we usually will agree that we disagree. Basically, that means I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's agree to disagree. Okay, that's fine. So I'll take the hint if someone says that to me. I don't want to talk about it anymore. No, no problem. We don't have to talk about it anymore. However, if we can develop a thick enough skin, or perhaps the mentality, the ability to interpret the data that's coming to us, not as a personal attack, but interpret it rather as um, data, as knowledge, as something that we might be able to assimilate and glean improvement from. We too often will just immediately react and bristle and push back because someone disagrees with us, whether it's Democrat or Republican or independent, or the issues of LGBTQIA plus, the issues of religion, all these other things that many people have very strong opinions, beliefs, feelings, and emotions about. We tend to really butt heads on. And I think if we can come to the table with an openness that we want to understand, um, and if all parties, at least both parties that might be on the opposite side of the fence, can both come to the table with a desire to understand what information is being given, is coming, then the discussion can be open and maybe not something that persuades other people to come to your side, so to speak, but something that can be persuasive in that they're understanding what you're saying more. So, having conversations about politics or about religion, not about sex, politics or religion, um, when it comes to, a patient in the chair, for me as a dentist, or if, I'm a client getting my hair cut or something, I think it's okay to have these conversations as long as everyone involved is open and willing to discuss in a way that seeks understanding as opposed to enforcement or winning an argument. So that's what I got for you. A review of the life of Pi, the book and the movie. Again, highly recommend. Really enjoyable. Good diversion. Good, eye-opening, mind-stretching adventure journey. I can't even imagine how I would respond or react being in that situation, like Pi in the story was. Love the book, love the movie, definitely love the movie, highly recommend the movie. Um, and then conversations in, mixed company with potential disagreeers. It's okay to disagree. It's totally fine, as long as we seek to understand, not to enforce and not to overbear. We can disagree and still have an open, good conversation, as long as everyone at that table in that conversation is willing to meet at the point of understanding, as opposed to I'm right, you're wrong, I'm smart, you're dumb, like from the movie Matilda. So, um, even though many people will cringe when I say this, I have to end with a dad joke. The best recipe for official Irish stew official Irish stew, is 239 beans. 239, that's the number. Because if you add one more, it's 240. And if you take 9 away, it's 230. So thanks for watching. If you enjoy this, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.